I hadn't really talked about most of the Nintendo Switch rumors and leaks that have been happening recently, mainly because, one, I wasn't all that interested in them, and there was a lot of unsubstantiated claims and a lot of withdrawals and, double backing on information given. But I just thought I would sort of like recap the last couple weeks that have been kind of crazy when it comes to leaks. I would say the main leak that everybody's been really talking about has been from the recently restarted company of GameShark. If you remember those back in the day where you would use those to basically cheat in games and stuff like that, but have recently come back as a weird AI company using AI for game cheats. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but for some reason they claimed the release date of the Nintendo Switch was going to be in September, which personally would work fantastic for me, and I hope it's in September. But then they would later claim and double back that actually no, that's unconfirmed. It's that we can't say for certain. And then they said it was like fall. So it's a little more vague, but I would be super happy if it was in fact in September. And that would work out for a lot of things, mainly because, a lot of holiday season is right around the corner from that. And there's not a lot of game console launches usually in November. And especially, with the Xbox and PlayStation's already being out, there isn't really many competition at this point for new consoles. So I can reasonably suspect it would be, fall or winter of this year. But I wouldn't really expect this announcement people are claiming would be in March. I have my doubts. I feel like they would cut it a little closer than that. Maybe sometime in June is when they would do that kind of announcement. Sort of June, July, E3 sort of time frame. That would be a really big, push for the new console at that point, because they have games are still coming out for the Switch. Don't want to really stop people from buying those games or de-incentivize them from buying the device, unless they have some reason to announce that, backwards compatibility with it too. And if they do in fact have that going for the Switch 2, I could see maybe them announcing that, the Switch 2 a lot sooner. But in general, I don't think it would be either in March or something like that. I feel like that's still too soon. But hey, I've been wrong before. I'd be more than happy to see it. And then later on in this whole debacle, we got a tweet from Jason Schreier on Twitter saying basically a spokesperson from the AI Shark company has just said they've been guessing this whole time. So that sort of ruins everybody's, hopes and dreams about this being true, which I was always skeptical from the very beginning, because why in the world just come out and say it like they did? And from a relatively unknown source, this was probably going to be false from the very beginning. But it would have been nice if it was true, but the likelihood of that being the case probably was always very low. As I said in the past, you should take these leaks with a relatively large grain of salt. The next larger leak that we got was basically the leak of the Nintendo Switch specs, which have been more or less not in any way confirmed, but heavily speculated on for a very long time at this point. And it's generally believed that it's going to be in another NVIDIA chip containing the T239, graphics, using NVIDIA's Ampere architecture. So it'd be relatively newer and around the performance of a handicapped RTX 2050, which in of itself is a handicapped RTX 3050. The main difference being the memory bandwidth speed going from 128 to 64, which is massively cut and directly, relates to the actual number of, per FPS you can actually get in the game substantially in this context. And with the limitation of 4 gigabytes of RAM. So with this specific processor, we have some data, but I wouldn't say a tremendous amount. We know it's an 8-core CPU. It has anywhere between 3.5 to 4.5 teraflops when docked, which is pretty vague in my opinion, and 1.7 to 2 teraflops in handheld mode, which also seems vague as shit. RAM is a little bit of a different problem. They say it's between 12 or 16 gigs, which if I remember correctly, the Switch has 8 gigs. So I think any of this would be an improvement. And since this is shared RAM with the graphics and the CPU, because it's a whole, SoC system on a chip, much like your phones are. So since it's a pooled, set of memory, that's actually pretty good. That's mean it has more, memory and VRAM in a sense than the RTX 2050. And on top of that, the 2050, although it has, I would say, 500 more CUDA cores than the T39 SoC, this actually even though it has that 500 less CUDA cores, it has over like 40 more gigabytes in terms of memory bandwidth, because the 2050 is capped at 64, and this, T239 rather, SoC has going to be around 100 gigabytes of memory bandwidth and 88 in handheld mode. So even in handheld mode, it would be theoretically more performant than the 2050. Because even when gaming, I highly doubt the 2050 because of the crippling memory bandwidth limitation, that 2050 doesn't actually get to utilize the efficiency that from the CUDA cores itself very well. Sure, it has them and it can use all of them, but I highly doubt that it's getting fed enough information to really saturate it. So, in my opinion, this would probably be either around the same performance or a little bit better than a 2050. But that's pure speculation based on the data we have at hand. And in terms of storage, people are speculating it'll have between 256 and 512, which I hope it's 512, but it'd probably be 256. An 8-inch display with a 1080p resolution and a 60 hertz refresh rate, and it will probably be IPS, not OLED, saving an OLED model later down the road, which I feel like actually might be true, judging by what they did, of course, with the Nintendo Switch 1 in this case, dropping the OLED much later down the road. Really did actually do a lot. It was fairly successful in my opinion. And so I would actually see them doing that again, purely because of how successful the Nintendo Switch OLED model really has become. And with all this speculation with the new, Ampere architecture of the, basically the power of the Switch 2, it should be capable of doing, DLSS ray tracing and, NVIDIA Reflex, just overall being a, more responsive system, which would be really nice, but I still have my doubts of Nintendo ever really using these upscaling and, all these technical side of the hardware ever at all. Overall, this does sound like a massive improvement upon the Tegra X1 currently in the original Switch, which at the time of release back in 2017, it was old then. By that point, the Tegra X1 in the Switch was already, I think, 2 years old. So Nintendo was working with substantially outdated hardware now, and even back then, it was still outdated in the sense when it first originally released. So seeing them use something at least relatively modern with NVIDIA's Ampere architecture, which only got replaced last year, so it's still not 100% up to date, but it still does put it in course with the modern sort of current generation consoles with using RDNA 2, and RDNA 2 competed with Ampere, so it's not totally lopsided like it was before, because the switch to the Xbox One was actually a massive gap in terms of performance. So I'm hoping in terms of the specs of the Switch 2, this, it turns out to be true. My belief in it is a lot higher because this is being repeated in so many different leaks that is using this T239 SoC, and that seems to be the common thread. All the other details could be wrong or a little bit different, or we don't have enough information for a more of a verified guess. But it's been speculated for a while now that it's going to be using this SoC, which I have some reason to believe that might be the case. And if all this other stuff is true, that's nice, but the only stock I would ever put into it is the likelihood of this being the right, power of the Switch 2 I would say is pretty high. mainly because of what it takes to develop a custom chip is something I don't think Nintendo would really want to do, because they've never really done that before, and the one time that they did, it resulted in the GameCube, their, I think, second worst selling console of all time. So I highly doubt Nintendo wants to be very, involved in the process of deciding how powerful the Switch 2 is, or having a lot of say in the architecture that they're using. But what are your thoughts on the Switch 2? Do you believe any of these rumors? Do you like some of these rumors? Do you hate these rumors? I'm really interested to hear your thoughts, because these rumors have been getting a little out of hand. I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, questions, and concerns down below. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. All the other social media garbage down below. And why not hit the bell? I noticed my bell people ringing are pretty good, but hit the bell. I've never said that before, but hey. And last but not least, have a wonderful day.